Lisa. Hey, Scott. How are you? Hey, Elizabeth. Hey, Jack. I just love that picture of you and your granddaughter, Jack. It just makes me smile every time I see it. She's precious. Hello, folks on YouTube as well. Hi, Ian. Glad you're here with us. Hey, Jack.
Hey, everybody. All right. What time do you have? Okay, it's just
I
great. No, this is good. Yeah.
All right, so I have a few announcements because next week is our last class of Discovering Buddhism, Module 5, Death and Rebirth.
It is?
Isn't it? The
I thought there was
21st?
6. Okay, great. I didn't know that. You never know. Okay.
I mean, if you want to go one more, we can. But I only had it on the calendar till the 21st.
Okay. That's
Are you going to be able to cover everything?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So next week is the last class.
Okay.
All right.
No, it's not that.
And then Discovering Buddhism is going to be on a break during September and October. And it just turned out that way for various reasons. But the next module, Module 6, all about karma, which Don Brown will be teaching, will start November 6th and run 6 sessions through December 11th. But don't worry, there's going to be plenty of things to do. Starting with August 26th, we have, which is coming up very, very, very quickly. I'm very excited. We're going to be doing an animal blessing and liberation. And of course, animals will be here in the Kadampa. And so if you have a pet that is controllable, you're welcome to bring your pet to the Kadampa. If you're participating online, No fear. We're going to be streaming it on Zoom and YouTube as well, so that your pets at home can also get all the wonderful blessings that Geshe Sangpo will be leading us through in this animal blessing and liberation. And even if you don't have pets, but you love animals, I encourage you to come on out on that Saturday. Geshe Sangpo will be leading prayers and mantras, and then do a very special blessing for each individual animal. And then he will then lead us outside to circumambulate around the entire building in the Gampa for even more merit. So unfortunately for that part, you guys online won't be able to circumambulate with us, but you can in your mind, okay? It's just as beneficial. Okay, so that's August 26th. And then September brings our introductory programs, Meditation 101 and Buddhism in a Nutshell. So if you've never gone through either of those courses, I do recommend them. Meditation 101 lays down a good solid foundation. It's all about meditation and the different types of Buddhist meditation. And then Buddhism in a Nutshell, it's called an introductory program, but it is quite in depth. I went through it once and was just like, holy cow.
Coconut.
It's a lot.
Big nut.
It's big, yes. So definitely take that one. And those both run for 5 sessions. Meditation 101 starts Tuesday, October 10th through November 7th, and Buddhism in a Nutshell starts November 14th for 5 sessions, ending on December 12th. Okay. And then last but not least, sorry, Steve, we have Buddhist Mind Science coming back, and this is a collaboration we've been doing with several other FPMT centers on the kind of the East Coast. And Buddhist Mind Science is also considered an introductory course, but it is also quite in depth. And we have wonderful teachers, Hans and Marina, who are part of, I think it's Toshiba, if I'm not mistaken, in Spain. And they're really, really very good and keep it quite interesting. So those modules, Module 4 will start Saturday, October 7th and go for 3 Saturdays, Saturday, October 7th, 14th, and 21st. And those run from 10 until 12 on Saturday mornings. And then Module 5, and it's okay if you haven't done any of the previous modules, you can jump right in. Module 5 is Wise Paths to the Heart. And that one will run Saturdays for 4 Saturdays, November 11th through December 12th. Okay, and then that brings us to a little bit of a break, for the holidays. All right, I think that's all. Oh no, I forgot another really, really important one. Gendon Hendrick will be joining us in September for in-person and online classes. And so he will visit for a week. And his schedule is coming online. I've got the weekend workshop up online so far, but he will also be teaching on Tuesday and Wednesday nights as well, with really exciting topics. At least I'm excited for them. So definitely check out his schedule and mark your calendars. All right, I think that's it.
And anybody in the area, since next week is our last week, and you want to come early, can the people come early?
Mm-hmm.
And just like if you have a snack, you want to eat something, walk around the stupa, hang out, chat before we start at 7. That would be great. So like 6:15, 6:30, whatever you want to do. You don't have to.
I typically am here at 6 to open up the building. So
Right.
yeah, 6:15.
Yeah, we can sit outside unless it's
Awesome.
boiling hot
Or rainy.
or raining. Okay. All right. So thank you all for coming and for tuning in. And let's start by setting our intention, our motivation. And the highest motivation that you can generate is the best. The highest being that our accomplishments will benefit all beings, including ourselves, so that we may be able to benefit them and ourselves in ways beyond what we can currently imagine. We can tie that into this class, how understanding the dying process, not fearing it, how will that benefit us, those around us? How can we help others? I think sometimes it's hard to imagine how our actions affect people we don't even know, but I think one thing COVID has shown us is interdependence. And so with that in mind, we'll say the four immeasurables.
If you're in the Kadampa, it's on page 34, 35, or up on the screen. We'll do this 3 times. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies.
Okay, and now we'll just do a little meditation, and I'll guide us through the advantages and disadvantages. So get into a meditative posture. If you're in a chair, make sure your feet are flat on the floor. Again, you know all the ways to check your posture. And again, the most important part is your spine. And then with each exhale, try to exhale the stress of the day, the thoughts reaching forward into the future or back into the past. Try to feel your body here, present. Become aware of your breathing, using that as a way to come back and not wander away too far. And then as much as you can, put all of your awareness on your mind itself. You're not necessarily following its thoughts, but can you feel your mind? Its energy, its power. Can you feel all the thoughts floating there, the sensations, the ideas, as though it were an ocean? How vast it is. And then as thoughts rise up, can you see them almost as a wave? And just let it sink back down into the nature of mind. It will rise up again. It may be very choppy, in which case, try to pull back a little bit from it and just watch. If it's calm, you may notice when a wave starts to rise up and then it settles back down, just like your breath. And just like your breath, there's often a pause between these natural waves. Can you recognize that pause? And see if it will expand a little bit. I'm going to guide us through the benefits of meditating on death. The 6 benefits, the first being your actions will become very beneficial as a result. Your spiritual practice will become very powerful. It's important to recall death at the beginning of your practice, or your day, or your hour. It's important to recall death in the middle of your practice. it's important to recall death at the end of your practice. You will die with a peaceful, happy mind, free of regrets. The disadvantages of not meditating on death. You'll not remember the Dharma. Even if you remember it, you will not practice it. Even if you practice Dharma, you will not practice well. Your practice will not be persistent, will be shaky. As a result, you'll create many unwise choices, negative actions will result. And you'll have more regrets at the time of death. So through this review, we understand the importance of using our death as an advisor, as a counselor, as a helper. Okay, and slowly open your eyes. So I went and talked with Geshe about all of your questions, and I brought paper. And I did also told him, that St. Francis of Assisi used to refer to death as brother death. He's like, that makes a lot of sense. That's a really good idea. So that's what I think, like meditating on death, if we remember meditating means to be familiar, it's so that we can feel this kind of, we can develop this kind of beneficial relationship rather than the one that we kind of just inherit culturally, which is what, the Grim Reaper and, all these horrible things. So let me just review my conversation I had with Geshe, because I dropped by after work one day and he just gave me this incredible mini teaching, maxi teaching. So people had asked, like, how do we have these texts on the death dissolution, and how do we know this? And so he was saying, well, Buddha taught it, and taught it as a tantric text, because a lot of the death dissolution, there's some parts of it that require a lot of practice with what's called winds and channels in the body that happen at the time of death. And so he said, great practitioners who can already control the various winds and channels in the body can go through those various stages without dying. And so it's not unfamiliar to them. So the Buddha taught this practice, lots of commentaries on it. High-level practitioners can go through those various stages without dying. And so they can also report on these different appearances that we're going to meditate on today. In the meantime, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. Yeah, and so through like deep meditation, a person can get in touch with what's called primordial consciousness, which usually is only reached through the time of death, very clearly. So then one of the commentaries on that death dissolution process is in this book, The Advice on Dying by His Holiness. So it's a poem written by the, let me see if I get this right. The poem is at the heart of the study. It was written in the 17th century by the Panchen Lama. And so in this book, each stanza of this poem recounts something about the death and dying, the death process, or, you know, the reasons why we're going to meditate on this. And then it goes through those experiences, and then the Dalai Lama is commenting on it. And it's really helpful, I found. And then he summarizes it in the back, what he's been talking about. So I will come back to this in a little bit, but I really recommend it. I've asked people to read it before for the class, but you never know how much a class really wants to go into the death dissolution process. So I don't require people buy this, and then it's a class that really doesn't want to go deep into it. But if that's something that interests you, I recommend this. Also recommend, if you're really interested in knowing a lot more about it, we should ask Geshe-la for teaching on it. You know, because he gave me, when he was living in my house, we met like every day for a while, and, you know, I have all my notes. It's, you know, there's a lot, and it's really interesting. And, okay. So then another question, we were talking after class about how come everything is so complicated in Tibetan Buddhism. And I thought of an interesting analogy of, you know, because like nutrition, we were talking about nutrition as an analogy, right? So you can do just some basic things and feel better right away. But if you really know the science behind why you're feeling better, that's going to be a little bit more advanced study. And then if you want to know why that great diet that you got from the nutritionist is not going to work in my body, you need to even know more. So I feel like the studies are kind of like that. If you do some of the stuff right away, definitely it's going to have an impact, and you'll feel the benefit of it. Then if you want to go deeper into it, it's going to be more. And, you know, so I was talking about this quite a bit with Geshe-la, and he said, yeah, he gave me these analogies, like we can't look at an elephant and look at the load it's carrying and feel bad about the load, the comparison of what we can carry. We just have to do what we can do, and it will yield results. But, you know, reaching enlightenment, the causes for that are, you know, considerable. So we carry what we can. That's what he was giving a lot of encouragement, and like, don't compare your knowledge. That's not really helpful. So to be aware that this is what I can do in this lifetime, and just keep on adding to what you're able to carry, you'll get stronger with that. And again, things right away can start to help, hopefully. If not, then we need to talk, because, you know, there's something we need to tweak so that it does. All right. So we talked about the great practitioners experiencing these death dissolution states in a deep meditation. Until then, we imagine them. So we go through visualization so we can become familiar with them, so that at the time of death, we're familiar with them and our mind isn't frightened, and we can prepare. And we're going to go through that in a minute, of the moment that clear light arises, the clear light of the mind arises. So that's why we're becoming familiar with all these steps and stages. You know, speaking personally, I cannot do all these practices with winds and channels. So the visualization of it, although, is really important, and it will help us at that moment. Yeah. So then he started talking about things we're going to get into. So our understanding of emptiness is similar to the clear sky experience. And so I also asked your question about what does the clear light, you know, look like if we don't have our eye sense. Well, all of these things we won't have our eye sense for. All of the different, they're called inner signs that will, he says, just appear. It doesn't matter that you don't have an eye sense organ anymore. It will appear in our consciousness. And So he said the closest thing we can do right now. He said even right now, if you just imagine one of your favorite holidays that you've had, that visual of where you went kind of arises in your mind. And if you were really very meditative, hypnotic state, you might even feel like you're there. I mean, it could get very, very strong. You certainly feel like that in your dreams at times. I do. And we're not using our eyes. It's our consciousness. So he said, don't let that get in the way of the visualization, that the clear light sky that we're going to get to, he said, you can go out. I mean, I've heard some people talk about it as like a very, very clear blue sky in the autumn. So there's no like particles. Geshe also talked about it as like when there's a full moon though, and you see the white around the moon, that kind of clarity, that kind of clearness. So it's no longer that you're kind of looking up at something. It's like it's just everywhere. Very subtle consciousness. Yeah. So then at the moment that the clear light experience arises, it's that all that's really left is very subtle consciousness. So we talked about gross consciousness, subtle consciousness, and very subtle consciousness. That's because everything else has now dissolved. So that's what is left, and you are then experiencing that primordial consciousness. This is why in the poem and in other books they talk about it as that is the mother clear light that arises. Your understanding of emptiness is the child clear light. And there's this opportunity to join your personal, like, I remember when he was first explaining this to me, I just thought, okay, but every being has this experience. He was like, yeah, but a dog dying, that's going to be like just a nanosecond. They're not going to have the chance with their level of awareness to do what we're going to practice, to catching that. So this is why it'd be really important to come to the class on emptiness and to read about it. In a very tiny nutshell, it's really meditating on the self and what is the self and what isn't the self, because our sense of self is so fundamentally different than the self that we're trying to access through the analytical process of meditating on emptiness. And when we have these moments of kind of just touching into that and feeling it and experiencing for a little bit, we're expanding that ability for us to really rest in that clear light. So even to today, that's why I said, let's just meditate on the nature of mind. Can you even feel the power of the mind itself, as like ocean-like? So there's just so much to say about emptiness. You could just substitute, since emptiness has so many different connotations in the English language, the true nature of self, the true nature of primordial consciousness. If there's time, we'll do a kind of little mini meditation on that as well. So then at that moment, if you're able to experience the clear light for as long as possible and just rest in it, then there's a chance that there'll be no bardo. Because if you're in the authentic clear light state of mind, there'll be no bardo and no rebirth. You won't have to just continually. You won't at that point come back to reincarnation, to reincarnate. Now, if you do, then you go through the reverse of the order of the death dissolution until you're back in a life. So let's see. Oh yeah, then there are all these notes on emptiness we'll talk about later. Yeah, there's some interesting things there that I think you'll like. And Geshe does a lot of really, right on Sundays sometimes does he talk about it? Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't want to go too deep because it's just so much and it can kind of freak people out. But it's not meant to. And he asked me once a good analogy for, like when we're talking about the two truths, or the two truths, or we were talking about how can you describe it? What in English is a good way of talking about that? And I said, like two sides of the same coin. They can't be separated. So the true nature of self, and then the kind of everyday nature of self. So what he said, when there's two sides of the same coin, we all know what that means. You cannot just have tails. It just can't exist. You cannot just have heads. And so like that, he said, you can't have absence without presence. And so we're very aware of this everyday self. And that can only be possible because of this. So even just when you talk about impermanence, we cannot move through the world without impermanence. We can't do anything without impermanence. I couldn't finish this sentence. I couldn't start this sentence without impermanence. And so similarly, that's what he's saying is with emptiness. We can't have presence without absence. So then kind of we get deeper and deeper and deeper into this, and we start to expand and understand that things aren't the way that they appear. This kind of then adds to our ability to really practice with death. So when Geshe-la's teacher was here last year, and I have lots of questions about the bardo and so on and so forth, his main advice to me was, keep studying and reading and practicing on emptiness, because that's what you want to focus on when you're going through the death dissolution states. So I just pass that along. All right. So what I want to do is walk us through a death dissolution practice, and then show you a video of the death dissolution process, more or less. Any questions or concerns or anything before we do this? Did I get all the answers from Geshe that were raised? Okay. Any questions at all? Okay. Do I need any on? Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do, remember that remember we talked about, the aggregates, and then there's also elements in our body, and then there's also kind of discernments, and then there's what they call sense bases, like the ears, the eyes, all of that. And then there's going to be something called an inner sign. So I'm going to be talking about how each of these things dissolves and what the sensation or the visual is that goes with it. There's going to be a much shorter way to do this. There's kind of all different kinds of ways to do this, but I'm going to read through some of the details so that then you can, and if you need to stop and take down a note because you want to ask me something, that's fine. Okay, so get in a comfortable position. Kind of check in with your intention. Why are we doing this? This is meant to help us in the dying process so that we can have the most powerful death experience possible and point our consciousness in the way that we want, the highest way. So this is meant to empower us. And as we go through this, start off by knowing that as you enter this death process, you feel ready. You feel confident. You feel ready. You feel loved. You feel safe. You feel excited. Not overly excited, but not fearful. You feel ready. So as the aggregate of form dissolves, your body becomes thinner and weaker, and your limbs loose. As mirror-like wisdom dissolves, forms, shapes, people become blurry. As the earth element dissolves, you feel as if you are sinking. You might even reach up as if to hold on to something. As the eye sense dissolves, you can no longer open or close your eyes. As the inner subtle form dissolves, you lose your natural radiance and glow. And the inner sign then is of a mirage, shimmering, blurry, watery, like a mirage in the distance. This completes the first stage. So mirage has arisen and smoke is coming. So the second stage, as the aggregate of feeling dissolves, you can no longer experience the three kinds of feelings: pleasure, pain, and indifference or neutrality. As the wisdom of equanimity dissolves, you can no longer remember the difference between pleasure, pain, and neutrality. As the water element dissolves, your mouth and nose dry and pucker. As the ear sense base dissolves, you can no longer distinguish sounds, inner or outer. And the inner sign then is smoke, like a room filled with incense or smoke from wood swirling around. And now you know smoke has arisen, mirage is gone, smoke is here, and fireflies are coming. This is the third stage. As the aggregate of discrimination dissolves, you can no longer recognize your friends or family. As the wisdom of discriminating awareness or discernment dissolves, you can no longer remember names or relationships of people around you. As the fire element dissolves, warmth withdraws, the body's heat gradually ceases. As the nose sense space dissolves, your breathing becomes jagged with short inhale and long exhale. As the inner sense of smell dissolves, you can no longer smell anything. And the inner sign of fireflies or sparks appear. So smoke is gone, fireflies are here, and a flickering flame is coming. So the fourth stage, as your aggregate of compounding aggregates dissolves, you can no longer move your body. And your awareness of mundane activities, your mundane thoughts cease. As your completion wisdom dissolves, even if you could hear a name, you cannot remember its meaning. As your wind element dissolves, you can no longer inhale. As your tongue sense base dissolves, your tongue has become short and thick, turns dark at the root, can no longer taste. As your body sense base dissolves, you can no longer feel your body. And now what arises is the vision of a flame or the light around a flame. The last three of the 25 components gradually dissolve. The aggregate of consciousness, the wisdom of sphere of phenomena, and the mental sense base. So the winds in the right and left channels move upward and open the head chakra. This causes white bodhicitta at the crown to melt and flow to the central channel to the heart, touching the central channel as it goes. Now you experience white vision, the mind of white appearance, like a very bright moonlight in autumn, or like the almost white sky caused by the light of the rising moon when everything is covered with snow. Where other inner visions had movement to them, these are perfectly still, beautiful, calm, sky-like. Now the winds on the right and left channels move down and open to the base chakra and the navel chakra, loosening knots and entering the central channel. This causes red bodhicitta at the navel to shoot up to the central channel to the heart chakra. Now you experience the red vision, the mind of red increase, like a clear red sky before dawn breaks, or like the copper red reflection in the sky, perfectly still. Now the red and white bodhicitta meet at the heart chakra in the indestructible drop at the central channel with its red and white halves. Now you experience the dark vision, the mind of dark appearance, like falling into darkness, or like a dark empty sky, or being in a dark room. You have some awareness and recognize the appearance of darkness, but then you become unconscious briefly, like a fainting. Now the clear light vision appears. This is the subtlest level of mind, occurring only after all the grosser consciousnesses have ceased. It's like an autumn dawn. The sky is so clear, no clouds, no dust. It's not bright like at noon, not red, not dark. Just clear sky. Nothing else appears. The yogis continue to practice at this point and can stay as long as they like in this state. The moment the indestructible drop splits open, your extremely subtle consciousness leaves the heart chakra and becomes the intermediate state's being's mind, even before it leaves the gross body. The extremely subtle wind that is the vehicle of the extremely subtle consciousness becomes the condition for the intermediate state being's mind, the Bardo being's mind. And the very subtle consciousness becomes the condition for the Bardo being's body. You can see the world you just left, your relatives, your body, but the karma is finished, so you do not recognize any of it or do not have a desire to go back to it. You then go through the 8 stages in reverse order. The dark vision, the red vision, the white vision, etc., and then take the body of the Bardo being, which is subtle and has no resistance to matter, is similar in appearance to the body of the next life. Different appearances will arise, dreamlike. If you recognize that this is dreamlike projections from your mind, there will be no fear. If your mind is not clouded, the Bardo state can be wonderful. The longest time spent in the Bardo is 49 days. The experience of being reborn is similar to the experience of waking up. Okay, so open your eyes and come back. Okay. Any thoughts or comments or was it generally a good experience or not so much? There was a lot going on? Yeah. You mean with all the dissolution or with what it brought up? being able to recognize it. Yeah. So I went into great detail here when I meditated, because I thought that would be, everybody needs to know what's being dissolved. But when you're going through it, you don't need to, and so even when I meditate on it, I don't go, okay, this consciousness, I mean, I go through the sensations. And then there's even a shorter way. And His Holiness says he meditates on this all throughout the day, the short version, which we'll talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really pleasant,
Oh, good.
and especially your voice is very calming and
good.
pleasant. So I hope it's like that.
Yeah.
But when I was reading the Lama Yeshe's in the assigned reading for this module, some of the way he was describing it was quite a bit more frightening when he talked about how, especially the part about how you lose your sense of self, which I just realized once we finished that as we were going through all of that, I think I was still thinking it was me, going through all that. But then and then you layer on top of that you kind of lose your sense of self and identity. And when I was thinking about that, as I was reading Lama Yeshe describing that I could feel some fear.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why it's a really good thing to practice with now, because I think if we enter into it feeling confident in the process instead of resisting it, that fear doesn't have to arise. If we can, the way that Geshe was talking about it too is like, you can develop this kind of excitement for, I need to pay attention because I know this is coming. And this clear light state is such an incredible experience, so I have my chance now to experience that. And the rest, it's all very temporary that we're moving through. When I read it, I mean, yeah, I guess there can be generate a lot of fear. I have to ask Geshe that. Now I have a question, because it says, you're not going to have pain, pleasure, neutrality. And in one of the things, there's like, you no longer have suffering because you're not feeling these distinctions. So would you also then have fear? That's what I'm going to ask him. I'll come back next week with that. Like, I think you can enter into it with fear for sure. And that will also be a problem, because it will then generate your experience then in the intermediate state. So you want to be as calm as possible. But I'm just wondering how much, because somebody had told me when we were going through it before that it really bothered her when I got to the part about you no longer recognize your family, you no longer distinguish their names and relationships. There's that, and then you can no longer recognize who they are at all. And I said, but remember that when there's a couple of different things. One is that's also happening almost every time you fall asleep. And we don't panic about it then. We don't panic like, oh my God, little kids sometimes do. But as we're falling asleep, we're not panicking that, I'm becoming immobile. We don't panic about that. But we also know, what waking up means. And then also, if we have more confidence that these relationships don't just disappear, they're not going to be in the same form, but they don't just dissolve into nothingness, right? Then that is also like, it's not the end. There's some really interesting quote I saw, like he said this Tibetan, I have to find it before we leave, this Tibetan proverb is something like, no one likes to die, but no one's dead, or something like that. I was like, oh, I like that. So yeah, I'll find out about that, but certainly a lot of fear can arise when we enter the bardo, because at that point, and I heard even right before the clear light comes up, sometimes that's when consciousness has a lot of more fear. And so remember when Robert Thurman was talking about, like, you might see a dragon, but just go right through the dragon, and now it's turning into a beautiful field. But that's also, it's all illusory. So if we I remember in the beginning when I was studying this, I was really disturbed by the bardo. I was like, oh my God, you want us to stay calm, but then you read about the bardo. I was like, oh, how am I going to stay calm? But it can actually be, and one of these, it was saying that Lama Tsongkhapa actually said you can even achieve enlightenment in the bardo. And when I was initially talking to Geshe about my fears of the bardo, he says, but you can practice bodhicitta there. It's all your mind. So if you're really working with everything throughout the day and in your dreams, then why not in the bardo? It's already your habit. So sometimes when I'm watching the news, it's not that I'm dismissing anything. It's like I'm watching my mind as I watch this. And can I direct how my mind is going to respond in this very difficult situation? Can I question its reality? So then, yeah.
My question is related to the time, like, logistically, the time from, mirage to clear light to the bardo state and back again, maybe.
Right.
Is this something that happens quickly, can take, years?
Okay. Let's hope not years. Well, I mean, so yes, if I am in a car wreck, it's all going to happen very quickly. So I wouldn't necessarily notice all these stages, right? I might suddenly find myself in the bardo, which is why it can be confusing to beings who are just suddenly in the bardo, which is also why it's a really good practice throughout the day to go, am I awake? And then try that in your dreams, because if I did have a sudden death and I've already been practicing that, I might recognize, oh, I think I'm actually in the bardo now, and do something rather than hang around, So then my experience watching people die is sometimes some of those states obviously can be longer, and then some of those states in particular. So my mother, I watched when she was in the first stage, when she couldn't close her eyes and all of that. And then when the stage where, I think it's the third stage, where her breathing was really slow, it was a really long time. Much longer than my father. It all happened for him like in one day. My mother, it was over the course of 2 or 3. So does that answer your question?
Well, I guess my question is, with very elderly people,
Oh,
you can kind of see this happening
right.
for maybe years prior to the death, like the drying up and the not remembering and names, or and things, and hearing and vision, all of this is starting to go,
right,
even in old age when you're still alive. So I mean, is that related to
I asked
this?
Geshe that very same question. And it's kind of like that can be going on kind of just natural, the aging process. These things can be weakening, but still, even if those are, like in my mother's case, who had dementia, right? It's still, when she dies, she's still going to go through what we just described, even though some of these, like the sense organs, are changing, dissolving, all of this. It's not the same thing as that actual death dissolution. But it is interesting. We're watching the body get, the natural glow going and the limbs becoming looser, all of that. Yeah.
This is a little off topic, but could you talk about like what triggers because in the bardo you said you take the form of your next life. Where in the process does that actually happen?
Gosh.
Sorry.
Well, it's happening right now.
Every day?
Well, I mean, everything that we're doing is setting up the causes and conditions for our next life, so I mean, I think we won't know till we're in the bardo, but everything that we're doing is creating, we're the creators of our next moment, even, for tonight. And so then, this is why I always say, we're the keeper of the river. So there's lots of things that we can do, have done, and will continue to do that contribute to that next life experience. Does that answer it? But then I think you're saying, like, exactly where in that process is the bardo being? Should have left her that mic. Yeah. No, it's good. Thinking's good.
I guess I'm just thinking, like, they say there's a seed that's triggered at some point, or at least I've heard that or read it. And with all the seeds that we carry with us from all of these past experiences, and not all are good. And so part of preparing is making sure that you take care of the loved ones, that they know that you love them, that you've talked to them, that you've asked forgiveness for people that you maybe have harmed or that kind of thing. So that when you actually are coming to your deathbed, you don't, and you maybe even sorting out all your physical property, you know, the stuff, getting that all sorted out and donating your money and things, so that when you come to your deathbed, you're clear in your mind that you're just ready to do this and not thinking, oh crap, I should have talked to so-and-so, or I forgot about this thing or that thing, or oh, I wish I had my teacup. I love my teacup, or whatever, whatever it is.
Rosebud, That's an Orson Welles reference.
So I guess I was like, I guess you do have to practice every day trying to.
Yeah. You do, so, I mean, I think you're asking big and little questions. So big, yes, you have to practice every day, so that, you know, there's so many opportunities to practice just a lucid hold on things, you know, like how to cherish things without grabbing them. And there's so many opportunities to practice every goodbye, every, you know, recognizing that when things come together, they go apart. There's that. There's lots of opportunities to practice generosity, all the things that we're trying to practice. All contribute. And I think then you're asking, like, well, then where's this moment that the seed? So did you hear in when I was reading about that, when the very subtle consciousness then, did everybody hear that? Okay. And I don't know if this is in the, I don't know if this thing that I have is in the reading. So, so after, you know, the clear light experience, however long you stay there, I was going through all the winds and channels, and then now how does the mind leave the body at the time of death? Death occurs when the indestructible drop splits open, and the extremely subtle mind that's inside there and wind leaves your heart chakra in the central channel, and depending on which rebirth you will take, exits the body, the gross body, at one point or another.
Oh, okay. I remember, and then reading the Amitabha Buddha reading, they talked about it. You want to come out the crown chakra.
Right. And so then that's called throwing karma then. I mean, I didn't want to get into too many things, but in a nutshell, one thing leads to another. Okay. And so if you're Scrooge your entire life, it's going to be really hard to have that death experience be very positive and throw your karma in the right direction. But if you watch, if you read Charles Dickens, he didn't. He stopped that horrible stream that he'd been polluting and had this incredible turnaround moment, right? Mm-hmm. So imagine if you're doing that much earlier and you're cleaned up this river, and now you have a greater chance to direct where that's going to go. There's throwing karma. We can get into a little bit of that next week.
Okay. So it's partly, the answer then is partly everything we do every moment up until we die.
Everything we do every minute is certainly going to help that moment, because you want to throw good karma. If you don't have much good karma to throw.
I don't want my weed to be out there.
Right. It's just, we're directing. And so here you've spent your whole life trying to, weed your garden, clean things up. Now you can even do that at the moment of death. So that's what we're now kind of focusing on, that death dissolution process, how to become familiar with it so it's not frightening. Because sometimes if you're not aware of it, then those experiences, like the sinking experience, the person might feel like they might be having a lot of hallucinations with it, because they're so unprepared, right? And so they feel like they're falling, and they're trying to reach out. They haven't really gotten to that point where they're so still in the death dissolution process. So this is why people, it's uncomfortable to see this. People are trying to get out of their beds, they're kind of freaking out. But if they're familiar with the process, and then in this book, Jeffrey Hopkins writes an introduction, and he talks about how he worked with whatever kind of understanding people had. So his mother, he went to his mother when she was in her last days, and he saw her panic, and he thought about like, what words, what's her beliefs? And he knew that spirit held a really important meaning for her. So he just whispered to her, now is the time of spirit. And he said she just calmed right down. There's a center member who died recently that I think a lot of you knew, Ryan. And so I was talking to his mother and texting back and forth, and I said, just tell him, because Geshe and I had gone many times before he died, and I said, tell him he's completely safe. She said when she whispered that to him, she could feel him, even though he practiced this. She said that reminder. And so there's lots of times throughout this, Geshe has said also, if there's someone who can remind you of something that's important in your practice when you're in these stages, it will be helpful. Even when he was saying, even when the ear sense organ is dissolved, you can still say something to that person. They're sensing it from a different place, and that will help them. If you just remind them, like bodhicitta, then that will help them, again, keep their mind in the direction that you want. I told him once I had this dream that I died, and it was just this weird thing of like, it's kind of like a shock went through my body. I got up from this chair and went over to that chair, and I was like, it's not that different. I said, I told him that really confused me, because I said, I thought it was supposed to be so different. I said, it was like I looked around and I still had my memories. And he goes, yeah, you will for a while. And I was just kind of blown away by that. He said, that's why then, you can even practice in the bardo. So it'll help to be able to do that if we're doing it now.
Yes.
That's the whole point of why we go through the advantages of death, meditating on death. It'll make our practice stronger. It'll give us that kind of motivation. So, yeah. Any other? Oh my goodness. Yeah, Chris. I just realized the time. Yeah.
It's too big.
No, tell me.
Okay. Couple of Sundays ago, out in the lobby, for some unknown reason, Robbie came up to me and said, all these different things like, hell realms and everything, those are all just states of mind, Chris.
Yeah.
Now, are all these things, are they just states of mind too? Is it all?
That's a good question.
Maybe, am I like worrying too? I'm not worrying, but just.
Yeah.
Or are, I guess they really, yeah, because there's no real smoke, there's no real fireflies, there's no real lamp,
Right.
And the bardo really isn't a real place. It's just your mind bouncing around.
It's all a mental construction. I remember when somebody was telling me.
Never mind.
Somebody's talking to me recently, like, gender is a mental construction. I was like, what isn't? Time is a mental construction. What isn't a mental construction? But, the mind is riding on the body. And so in this instance, the aggregates and everything that comes together so that I can label this steep is all dissolving. And so then we get down to these very subtle mind states that we're not very in touch with. And so, but yes, that's why we can't give you a one size fits all of like the first death dissolution stage. One person will feel like they're trapped under a building. Another person will just feel like, oh, I'm sinking because, I'm dying. So when I go to I've had so much dental work and they give me nitrous oxide, which is, thank you, nitrous oxide. And somebody told me, oh, they hate it because it makes them feel like they're floating. I'm like, that's the point, So, that's the whole point, is to feel like you're floating. What do you want to feel? But I think it's that's why we're, it's the same gas. It's, it's same physiology, but her mind gets panicked with that floating feeling. And I'm thankful they don't sell it in the drugstore, so. So just different minds, but don't tell me. Don't tell me. I'm clean and sober. But my point is that, it's that same experience, but different minds. And so this is going to be a profound experience because, but there's that element of like what we're bringing into it. Yeah. Yeah. I remember I don't know how many of you remember Shanti from the center. Yeah. So her mom was dying and Geshe and I went, and her mom was so excited. Her mom was not really a Buddhist. I mean, she'd come to the center and she really appreciated Geshe, but she hadn't spent much time studying it. But she was so ready. And so, I mean, that's one benefit of having an illness that, she had made her peace with it and she was really looking forward to it. And Shanti said all day she would kind of slip in and out of consciousness and then open her eyes and say, "It's so beautiful." I mean, imagine if that's the way you entered into it, right? And then, I mean, I try to collect stories like that, and then Steve Jobs, what was his last words? Like, "Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow." That's what he said. So, I mean, there's that. There's that. So yeah, so we're going to wait and show the video next week as the grand finale. We'll bring popcorn, and there's a video, the clip that I'm going to show. It's from, I saw it a long time ago, and it's this Tibetan monk and this little boy, and they're going to this family, and they're talking this guy through the stages of dying, and it's animated, so you kind of get to see some things, and it's kind of fun. But then we make our own video. Yeah.
Is this like the mind separating from the body? Is that, we're not just talking about, I know it sounds like we're talking about the body is going through these stages.
But it's way more than the body, yeah.
Okay, and is it because our mind is leaving this form,
yeah,
and going to another,
yeah,
right? So is it the separation of the mind from this form to the next?
Yeah.
Is that what all this,
right,
the big general theme about this?
Yeah, so it's well, I think it's both. So it's the dissolution of all these things that make up our body and our consciousness. And so then all those aggregates include the things that we're dissolving, like our ability to distinguish between pain, pleasure, neutrality, our ability to remember things, our ability to discern you're you and he's him, and that ability. All of those abilities, so those are these different mental factors, are dissolving along with the elements in the body that keep fluids going and all of that. So the physical, but also the mental aggregates, they're all what they would say dissolving. And then the thing that leaves that you're talking about is this most subtle consciousness, which is wrapped inside subtle consciousness, which is wrapped inside gross consciousness. And so we do access some of the subtle consciousness at times. It's very subtle consciousness is so much harder to. And so that's what travels then forward on the force of our karma. Yeah. And you can also find Venerable Robina's teachings online, and she's so funny too, the way that she describes. She goes, it's not like subtle consciousness is going around and whoops, I went into a dog instead. It's not like that. So she talks about how these karmic forces propel us in certain directions, and this is what I really loved about reading about death and dying in the Tibetan Buddhist books that I found when I was first searching for it, is how much is in our control to point that in the direction that we want to go. We're not just like a leaf in the wind. Yeah. Yeah. Any questions online or?
Question.
Yeah.
Like the idea of trying to practice without gross consciousness. Have you ever read anything or heard anything about how that's possible?
I mean, in the bardo, you mean?
Yeah, even with that dissolution state, if you're no longer if there's no gross consciousness connected to your mind,
Yeah.
how are you conscious to think about practicing if there's no gross consciousness to like make
Yeah.
the decision to like? So I guess it's like comes from practice
Mm-hmm.
of at that settled state. I
Right.
imagine. I'm just kind of clueless.
Yeah, because I mean, even when we get into, I mean, I'll double check this with Geshe, but even when we're getting into a very so deep meditators, right? They're not just, they're able to still observe what the experience, even though they're trying to move away from gross consciousness, which is like a choppy ocean, right? And go down into subtle and then maybe even more subtle consciousness where you're still observing what's going on. Well, still consciousness has awareness. It's just not like doing math or something, you know. It's or like I got to do the dishes, but wait, what is going on here with the clear light? It's not it's like we've quieted that part, and then this part still has wisdom and knowledge and can observe. And I don't know if this, yeah. So, you know, like experiences you hear about when, well, it's probably a little too woo-woo. I'll just stick with this for now. But yeah, I mean, it still has, it's still consciousness. In fact, it's, you know, super powerful consciousness. And in that state, what Geshe is saying is as we practice with these visuals that we're doing now, it'll become more familiar so it won't get sidetracked with fear or like confusion. And in the bardo, so now it's, you know, all these different, like in a dream state, all these different things are coming up. That's almost like these projections from your mind that are out there kind of in this bardo state that you don't have to be fooled by. So, you know, I almost think of it as like burping out, your consciousness just burping out all these things. Yeah, I'll bring in some more information about that too. And yeah, I think some of that's going to be in this book. Because in the end, they talk a lot more about the different kind of consciousnesses. But it's not just like blank nothing. It's not just like, you know, it's awareness. It's massive awareness. Think of it like as the whole ocean versus just all the waves on top. You know. Yeah. All right. I hope I haven't made a mess of things. It's hard stuff. I know Geshe at one point when we were talking, he goes, a lot of this is very hard to put into words because it's the indescribable, you know, which is why I like the analogies of the sky, sky-like. Yeah. Yeah. For those of us who don't know what Chris is just asking, is this where we throw a sled, Rosebud, into the fire? Watch Citizen Kane. Okay. It did open with a dying scene and a big mystery about why he was saying what he was saying at the moment of death. Right? Okay, so let's take a minute to dedicate our merit that, you know, so much energy put into arriving here today, whether you're online or in the room, the energy to get here, to think about this, to meditate on a topic we don't usually meditate on. I mean, how many people in North Carolina right now are doing this? Trying to practice Buddha Dharma, preparing for life and death. So we dedicate this merit to the highest possible, so that all the obstacles between us and our complete, fully awakened state for the benefit of all those, including ourselves, all those obstacles are eliminated. And we will read Shanti Deva's prayer together as a way to kind of amplify that dedication.
This is on page 3233 if you're in the Kadampa, or it's on the screen. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may these never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world.
Thank you, everybody. And if you want to come early next week, we'll be hanging out and walking in circles. Okay. Take care.
Thank you,
All
Steve.
right.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Hi, Heen. Hi, Carmen.